I think that we tend to say to ourselves, oh, so-and-so suffered here on earth, and so he's already in heaven. It's to give us some comfort and to say to ourselves, well, that soul is surely already with God. And maybe they are. But I think it would be a terrible shame if we neglected to pray for them, thinking that they're in heaven already. I don't remember the saint's name off the top of my head now, but it was a nun. And she is a saint. And she had a great devotion to the souls in purgatory. And her father died. And she prayed for his soul. But then as, the days went on, she stopped praying for his soul. Perhaps she thought he was already in heaven. And a couple years went by. And remember, this nun was very devoted to the souls in purgatory. She made all kinds of sacrifices, all kinds of masses she offered for them, all kinds of prayers and rosaries she said for them. And a couple years go by, and her father's soul appears to her. And he's covered in flames. And he says to her, "My daughter, don't forget me." And she is shocked by this vision of her father's soul still in purgatory. And she starts crying because she felt that she had been so ungrateful and so neglectful not to have prayed for her dad. And he said to her, "Don't worry. God allowed you to forget because I had to suffer longer. If you had remembered, my soul would have been delivered, and it wouldn't have been right. God allowed it so that because I had many sins that I had to expiate, and God would not allow your prayers for me." And of course, after this vision, she got all the nuns to pray for her dad. She fervently prayed for her dad's soul and got all the nuns to pray too. And like the next couple days, it was just a couple days later, she saw his soul going up to heaven. So the prayers of nuns are very, very powerful, I believe, and children for the souls in purgatory because of their innocence and their goodness. Children and nuns can help souls in a great, great way. So whenever someone in your family dies, a loved one, you should have your little children pray for them or ask the nuns to pray for them. I do think that's one of the best ways we can help our loved ones. And of course, have masses said for them. So let's move on now to the next prayer. I wanted to mention this. At the end of the memento for the dead, the priest, you'll see that he bows his head. He says, "Et perundum Christum Dominum nostrum," the priest bows his head. And it's interesting because according to something I read, and I believe it's to be true, I think it was Pope Benedict XV, who was the Pope after Pius X. He said that just as Jesus bowed his head when he died on the cross, so at this part of the Mass, the priest bows his head to pray for the souls in purgatory. Just to pray for the dead. Jesus bowed his head when he died. The priest bows his head to remember the dead. So at this point in the Mass, mystically speaking, we're at the point where our Lord bowed his head and gave up the ghost. Father Dunny, in his book on the Mass, which, by the way, I heard from the Angelus Press, they're going to reprint this book. We're very, very happy about that. This is a wonderful book. Father Joseph Dunny wrote this book in 1924 on the Mass. And the Angelus said that they're going to reprint it. And it is a book, as I've told you in the past, it's a book written perhaps for, middle school, 8th, 9th, 7th, 8th, 9th graders. But this book was written for Catholic schools in the 1920s. And I think that it's very, very valuable for us as adults, for our schools, for our high school students, and for adults to read this book. Because basically everything I'm telling you in these talks, Father Dunny says in a better way in his book. And he has all the same examples, the same stories, he has illustrations. This is a really terrific book. So I'm very glad to hear that the Angelus is hopefully going to reprint it very soon. And I hope that maybe one day we'll have it in our schools. But Father Dunny has at the Memento for the Dead, he's talking about how the measure of mercy you show will be the measure of mercy you shall receive. So the amount of mercy you have for the souls in purgatory is the amount of mercy you will receive when you die. And he has this little poem that I wonder if he wrote, because there's no author's name next to it. But here's the little poem. Thou art praised for thy science, thy art, and thy grace, for the courage so high that belongs to thy race. But when all is admired and all has been said, there is nothing surpasses thy love for the dead. So everything else, you can praise someone all you want for everything good they did, but the most wonderful thing is when somebody is devoted to the souls in purgatory. I knew a very, very good lady. I think she is a saint. She died now 6-7 years ago. And this lady was so devoted to the souls in purgatory. It was astounding. She collected pennies for the souls in purgatory. And, people just throw their pennies away. Just like, I don't want pennies. They leave them in the stores, leave a penny, take a penny. And she would never do that because she collected pennies for the souls in purgatory. As a matter of fact, she was so bold as to go into the stores and she would say, "Can I have those pennies for the poor souls?" And they'd look at her like, "What?" And they'd say, "Yeah, you can take them." And, just 4 or 5 pennies. And she would take them. Do you know, this lady had tens of thousands of masses offered for the souls in purgatory. It's unbelievable what she did just by collecting pennies. But every time she got up a certain amount of money, she would, of course, cash it in and send a check to a priest somewhere and ask him to say a whole bunch of masses for the souls in purgatory. She did this for many, many years. I think she did it for 45 years. She was doing that. Of course, pennies were a lot more valuable when she first started. But near the end of her life, they weren't so valuable. But in a way, it was easier for her to get that money. But she had, what she said to me one day after Mass? We were at lunch or something, like a group of parishioners went to Mass. Went to lunch. And she said, "I want to go to purgatory." And I looked at her like, "You're crazy. Why would you want to go to purgatory?" And she said, "Because I have such a love for the souls in purgatory that I want to be with them." And I was like, I don't think that's right. I don't think you should want that. And I think after talking to her for the next 10, 15 minutes, I finally convinced her that it would be better if she went straight to heaven, because then she could help them. If you go to purgatory, you can't help the souls in purgatory. You're in the state of purgatory, you're no longer able to help and pray for them. So they can't help themselves. And that's why they need your prayers. They need your sacrifices. They need your masses. Don't forget them. Be very devoted to the souls in purgatory. As Father Dunny's poem said, there is nothing you could value so much in a person as their love for the poor souls in purgatory.